My name's Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside: small town, Sunday church, backyard barbecues. But behind that image was a lifetime of quiet resentment, mostly between me and my sister, Lauren. She's 2 years older, charming, beautiful, the kind of person who always knows what to say to win people over. Mom used to say she had the gift of light. I always thought she had the gift of manipulation. When Mom got sick, ovarian cancer, I dropped everything. My architecture firm let me work remotely, and I moved back home to take care of her. I thought maybe that would bring Lauren and me closer, that taking care of Mom together would patch the cracks between us. But Lauren had other priorities. Her husband, Kyle, and their business ventures, which somehow always seemed to need rescuing from disaster. She visited maybe once a month, breezing in with store-bought flowers and fake tears, snapping pictures for Instagram captions like "family is everything." Meanwhile, I was changing bedpans and learning how to inject morphine. I'd stay up late sketching house designs at the kitchen table while Mom slept. She'd wake sometimes and whisper, "You always build peace, Emmy, even when you're hurting." I never told her, but that line became the reason I bought the cabin. It was a small two-bedroom place nestled in a wooded stretch outside Asheville, North Carolina, quiet, isolated, surrounded by towering pines. I'd closed on it 3 weeks before Mom died. She knew about it. She smiled when I showed her the photos. "It looks like a healing place," she'd said. "Promise me you'll go there after I'm gone." I promised. The funeral was brutal. I stood beside her casket in that stiff black dress Lauren picked out. "It looks respectful," she said, and tried not to break. People I barely knew hugged me. Lauren cried theatrically in front of everyone, her mascara running, clutching Kyle's arm like a grieving widow. He looked bored, checking his phone between condolences. When it was over, Lauren hugged me tightly, her breath sweet with wine. "We'll get through this together, Em. We're family." I nodded, too numb to respond. I didn't realize at the time how hollow her words were. A few days later, I decided to finally go to the cabin, Mom's last wish for me. I loaded my car with boxes, some of Mom's old books, a few things from her sewing room, and the urn with her ashes. I planned to spend the first night there alone, maybe scatter some of her ashes by the creek at sunrise. It was supposed to be sacred. But when I pulled up the long gravel driveway, my heart stopped. There was a silver Toyota Highlander parked out front, Lauren's. And beside it, a muddy black pickup truck I didn't recognize until I saw the bumper sticker. "Built, not bought." Kyle's. At first, I thought maybe they were just visiting. Maybe Lauren had come to drop off something, maybe to check on me. But then I saw the faint glow of light through the window and smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was living there. I got out of my car slowly, crunching gravel under my boots. My hands were shaking. The air smelled like pine and rain. I opened the front door, my front door, and nearly choked. There were boxes stacked in the hallway. Not mine. A pile of Kyle's tools sat on the kitchen counter. His boots were by the door. Lauren's purse hung from the coat rack. The cabin smelled like someone else's life. I called out, "Lauren?" Her voice came from the living room, casual, like nothing was wrong. "Oh, hey, Em. You're early." She came around the corner, wearing one of my hoodies, holding a mug of coffee. Her blonde hair was messy, her expression mildly surprised but not guilty. "We were going to call you tomorrow. Things got a little crazy at the house. The roof's leaking again, Kyle's truck broke down, so we figured we'd stay here for a bit." "For a bit?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Lauren, this is my house." She smiled, that patronizing smile I'd hated since childhood. I know. But it's our family house now, right? Mom would want us to look out for each other." My pulse pounded in my ears. "This isn't about Mom," I said. "You moved into my house without asking." Kyle walked in just then, wearing sweatpants and no shirt, like he owned the place. "Hey, hope you don't mind. The water pressure's a little low in the shower, by the way." I stared at him, words frozen in my throat. He yawned and grabbed a beer from the fridge, my fridge, before heading back down the hallway. Lauren sipped her coffee like nothing was wrong. I've been taking care of Mom for the last year, I said finally. I sold half my things to make this happen. This was supposed to be my place to start over. Lauren sighed, setting her mug down. You're still so dramatic, Em. It's just temporary. Kyle's been stressed, and I didn't want to be in that big house alone. Plus, it's so peaceful here. We'll leave once things settle down. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just turned and walked out to my car. My vision blurred with tears. I sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I could still hear Mom's voice. Promise me you'll go there after I'm gone. I had gone, but someone else had gotten there first. For the next few days, I tried to be rational. I called Lauren, left messages. She barely replied. When she did, it was with short, dismissive texts like, "We're just getting back on our feet, Em. Chill." I tried to talk to Kyle, but he didn't answer my calls either. Then, I drove back again a week later, hoping maybe they'd left. Instead, I found new furniture in the living room. A flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. A neon sign that said Kyle's Garage. I walked into my bedroom, my safe space, and froze. Lauren had redecorated. My bedding was gone, replaced with her designer comforter. My nightstand had her makeup on it. That's when it clicked. They weren't staying. They'd moved in. I left again that day, but not before noticing a thin line of mud across the floor near the back door. The same door that led to the small shed where I kept my architectural tools and Mom's old sewing machine. Something in me hardened. Lauren had taken advantage of me all my life, emotionally, financially, even socially. But this time, it wasn't just manipulation. It was invasion. When I got home to my apartment in town, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the floor surrounded by boxes of Mom's things. One of them was labeled Personal Letters. I opened it, and on top was an envelope with my name on it. Mom's handwriting. My throat tightened as I read her words. Emmy, you've always been the quiet strength in this family. Don't let anyone make you feel small for it. When people take from you, remember, you know how to rebuild. You were born to design new beginnings. I stared at those words for a long time. Rebuild. That night, I stopped crying. I started planning. Because if my sister thought she could steal my home, my peace, she had no idea what kind of foundation I could lay when pushed too far. For the first 24 hours after I found Lauren and Kyle in the cabin, I felt like I was moving underwater, slow, stunned, every motion muffled. Grief had already hollowed me out. This new betrayal filled that hollow with something colder. Anger, for sure. But beneath that, a clarity I hadn't had since Mom's hospice nights. This is mine. Reclaim it. I didn't scatter ashes that morning. I sat on the floor in my small city apartment with Mom's letter folded in my lap and a legal pad on the coffee table. I wrote down everything I could remember from the house, the exact time I'd closed, the inspections, the name of the closing attorney, the serial numbers of tools in the shed. I scribbled dates when Lauren had been in and out of Mom's life and a list of favors she'd asked for with promises she never kept. The list read like a map to everything she'd taken. There's a specific kind of rage that becomes methodical. It's the opposite of the messy grief that pulls you apart. This was a blueprint. I started adjoining facts to feelings like I was drafting construction notes, foundation issues, load-bearing supports, where to shore up a case. It felt absurd and comforting to translate betrayal into steps. Step 1 was documentation. I drove back to the cabin that afternoon with my camera phone and a sense of purpose that steadied my hands. From the road, I shot wide angles of the truck in the drive, the Highlander with its bumper sticker still visible, the windows aglow. I walked the perimeter and took photos of the back door with a mud smear, the shed with the padlock hanging open, the kitchen sink with Kyle's coffee rings on the counter. I didn't force a confrontation. I spoke to no one. If they were there, they didn't come out to stop me. Maybe they thought I'd give up. Maybe they thought I was being dramatic. That was fine. Let them think that. Back in my apartment, I uploaded the photos and labeled them by date and time. I started a digital folder, cabin, and created subfolders with captions, evidence_invasion, personal_property, tampering_shed. I scanned the closing documents, the deed, the text messages where Lauren had joked about how peaceful it would be to crash at your cabin, and the email from the realtor that confirmed I'd closed 3 weeks before Mom's funeral. Everything I could file, I filed. Step 2 was legal consultation. I called the attorney who'd handled Mom's estate, an elderly woman named Ms. Rowan with gray hair and a voice like tobacco and honey. She had shown me more compassion in court filings than Lauren ever had in texts. I told her everything.
She didn't gasp.
She didn't give me platitudes. She asked questions that made me feel less crazy. When did they move in? Is your name on the deed? Have you given them any written permission?
Yes. No.
No, I answered. Good, she said. Come by tomorrow. Don't confront them. Let us build the right paper trail. People think family gives them legal carte blanche. It doesn't. Her voice felt like armor. The next morning, Ms. Rowan handed me a stack of options with a kind of brutal clarity only lawyers have. We could send a formal trespass letter demanding they vacate immediately. We could file for an injunction to restrict them from the property. If they claimed a right to stay because of caretaking or oral agreements, we could challenge that with written evidence of the sale and closing. For now, she said, we'd start with a letter. Formal, firm, notarized, and an offer. Vacate within 15 days or we'd move for immediate removal. She also suggested changing locks and posting a legal notice on the property as soon as they were served. Control the narrative legally, she said. Don't let them spin it. It felt almost funny, the idea of bringing legal structure to family betrayal, but also exactly right. Control the narrative. That phrase stuck with me. But I knew legal letters only work if you can prove intent and possession. So I did the small, practical things that would matter in court. I changed the passwords on the property account, the alarm codes. I had set up a Nest camera months earlier that I hadn't used in ages. I reactivated it and set it to record the driveway, and I pulled together proof of my mortgage payments and the closing statement. I photographed the inside of the cabin room by room, documenting what was mine and what was clearly Lauren's. I found receipts for items that weren't there on closing day and cross-referenced them with dates after Mom's funeral. There was a part of me that wanted to tell the whole town, to make a scene, to stand on the porch with the urn and shout about theft. But Ms. Rowan's cadence reminded me, go slow, collect facts, be undeniable. I admired her for making law feel like a quiet weapon. It felt civilized and righteous. Step 3. Allies. I realized I couldn't do this alone, emotionally or practically. I called Mara, my oldest friend, the one who saw my childhood and all the unglamorous stuff behind it. She drove out the next day and walked the property with me while I showed her the photos and the way Lauren had rearranged my bedroom. She didn't look shocked. She gripped my hand and said, "You're not overreacting. This is their audacity." She brought over boxes of fresh linens and insisted we remove Lauren's makeup from my nightstand the next time we were at the cabin. Mara's fierce loyalty felt like a wedge I could lean on. I also started quietly asking neighbors questions. We live in a community where everyone knows everything, but I couldn't be the person who only cried about betrayal. I asked, plainly, if anyone had seen them moving in, if they'd heard any contractors. A man named Hank who worked in nearby hobby farm mentioned he'd seen Kyle hauling in a big box with tools stamped on it 2 nights after the funeral. Didn't seem like he was just visiting, he said, sipping coffee on the back porch. Another neighbor, an older woman named June, lent me an extra set of keys, in case you need to get in, she said, pressing them into my palm like a baton. Step 4 was psychological. I needed them to understand, slowly and quietly, that my peace wasn't a plaything. I emailed Lauren a short message the night after Ms. Rowan sent the first letter. Lauren, I'm asking you again, please respect the property. I will be in touch through my attorney. This isn't personal theater. This is legal property. I didn't bait her. I didn't plead. I wrote it just as a fact. The following week, the letter arrived at the cabin. I watched the delivery confirmation pop up on my phone and felt something like satisfaction that had nothing to do with malice. The letter wasn't incendiary. It wasn't cruel. It was formal and cold, and it changed the tone of the house. After that, their social media posts load. A photo of Lauren with a filter and a caption like, "Finding Peace," vanished after 48 hours. Kyle's go-to-poker face photos disappeared too. That silence felt loaded. I could have escalated. I could have called the sheriff and screamed about trespass in the middle of the night. But I wanted the long play. I wanted them to decide to stay or go on their own after knowing there would be legal consequences and a clear paper trail if they didn't. If they tried to manufacture a sympathetic story about grieving family members taking refuge, I wanted to be the one with the files, receipts, and neighbor statements that told the opposite story. At night, when I lay awake, plans unfurled in my head like blueprints. Not poisons or traps, nothing like that. Practical things. Securing insurance that covered squatters, photographing personal effects that were undeniably mine, backing up digital files. I prepared emotionally, too, by imagining what a final confrontation might look like and how I wanted to show up, controlled, articulate, and unbroken. I practiced phrases in the mirror that weren't yelling but were firm. "This is not your home.
Leave.
You have been given every courtesy. We will proceed legally, if necessary." There was a small, private satisfaction that came with being prepared. It felt like Mom's voice, in a way, that idea of building peace again. I pictured the cabin restored to the way I'd bought it. My quilts, the faint smell of lavender, the sewing machine in the corner with Mom's tape measure hanging on the peg. I pictured scattering the last of Mom's ashes by the creek at sunrise and not having to look over my shoulder. That image became a corner of my future I refused to surrender. If Lauren planned to ricochet off my grief and land in my sanctuary, she was about to discover she'd picked the wrong blueprint to mess with. I'd been raised to rebuild, and once I set my mind to it, I found the kind of stubbornness that carries a hammer and knows which nails to hit. The strategy had a delicate moral line to walk. This was family. There was a time I would have tried to reason it out over coffee, cried with her at the kitchen table, and made compromises. But grief had clarified another truth. Being kind to someone who takes your life without permission is not kindness. It's surrender.
So I prepared.
I leaned on law, neighbors, and the steady kindness of friends. I documented, I filed, I connected the legal dots. And while Lauren and Kyle busied themselves with Netflix and new living room decor, I built an immovable case in the background, quiet, patient, and deliberate. The foundation didn't need theatrics. It needed facts. There was still a long road ahead. They might fight, lie, or try to manipulate whoever would listen. They might become dramatic and claim they were caretakers driven out by some cold city lawyer. But I had something they couldn't steal: proof and the will to see the right thing happen. For the first time since Mom's funeral, I slept with a steady heartbeat. I wasn't powerless. I was planning. When people talk about revenge, they picture something fiery and sudden: a slap, a scream, a dramatic confrontation. Mine wasn't that. It was slow, deliberate, like a storm brewing over still water. The first week after I moved into the cabin felt like living in a ghost's lungs. The house inhaled silence and exhaled memories. Every creak reminded me of my mother's voice, and every quiet corner made me feel like I was betraying her by letting Olivia live under the same roof, the one I built for peace, not chaos. But there was something about watching Olivia and Mark settle in like they owned the place that snapped something inside me. He'd fixed the carport like it was his home improvement project, and she'd taken over my mother's old rocking chair on the porch. She'd rock for hours, scrolling through her phone, while I watched from my bedroom window, the same chair where Mom used to drink coffee and hum gospel tunes on Sunday mornings. That's when I started preparing. I didn't tell anyone. Not my best friend Tara, not the kind old man who ran the local diner and always gave me extra syrup with my pancakes. Preparation, to me, meant reclaiming control, one quiet move at a time. It started with the house itself. When I built it 2 years ago, before Mom's cancer came back, I designed it myself, every inch. I knew where the wiring ran, where the crawl spaces were, where the foundations met the earth. While Olivia and Mark thought they were living rent-free in my cabin, I was setting up my own system: hidden cameras, motion sensors, and a backup generator that only I knew how to access. Every evening, I'd pretend to head into town for groceries. Instead, I'd drive 10 minutes away, park near the lake, and pull up the camera feeds on my tablet. I watched them live their new cabin life. The sister who'd left me to care for our dying mother, and her husband, who'd once tried to flirt with me at Thanksgiving while she was in the kitchen. It wasn't about watching them out of curiosity. It was about seeing them through my mother's eyes, the kind of clarity that strips away excuses. Mark was the first one to slip up. One night, around midnight, I caught him sneaking into my side of the house. He thought I was asleep. He rummaged through my drawers, probably looking for the property papers I kept locked away. The next morning, I greeted him with coffee. "Sleep well?" I asked, smiling. He flinched a little, that tiny twitch people get when they know they've been caught, even if you haven't said a word. Olivia didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't want to. She had this way of pretending the world was fine as long as she wasn't uncomfortable. That's how she survived Mom's illness, by pretending it wasn't happening. But I wasn't pretending anymore. Grief does strange things to the mind. Some nights I'd still wake up crying, reaching for my phone to call Mom, only to remember she was 6 feet under the oak tree behind the church. And then there were other nights, darker ones, when I'd lie awake imagining Olivia packing her bags and leaving, realizing what she'd done. But guilt doesn't visit people like Olivia. Not on its own. So I gave it a little push. I started small, subtle changes in the house that made them uneasy. I'd move things just slightly. Her mug would be an inch to the left of where she left it. The porch light, which Mark fixed, would flicker on and off at odd hours. Once, I left a note in Olivia's handwriting on the kitchen counter. We shouldn't have done it. She stared at it for a full minute before crumpling it in her hand and tossing it away. But she didn't sleep much that night. Neither did Mark. By the third week, tension hung in the cabin like humidity. I could feel it in their voices, the sharpness of their conversations, the way they avoided each other in the hallway. I was patient. Revenge wasn't about yelling or exposing them. It was about letting them feel what they made me feel, powerless, uncertain, unwelcome in my own home. I remember sitting on the porch one evening, sipping coffee as the sun went down, the forest burning orange and gold. Olivia stepped outside, her hair messy, her eyes rimmed red. "You think Mom would want us fighting like this?" she asked. It was the first time she mentioned Mom since the funeral. I looked at her, really looked at her. Mom wanted us to take care of each other, not take advantage of each other. She looked away, her jaw tightening. "You've always been dramatic, Em. You build these stories in your head until you believe them." I didn't answer. There was no point. I let silence be my weapon. That night, I sat in my car under the moonlight, watching the live feed on my tablet again. Mark was pacing the living room, muttering to himself. Olivia was in the kitchen, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. Then she froze. She stared at the wall, right where Mom's photo used to hang. I had replaced it earlier that day with another photo, one of Mom and me, smiling, taken the summer before she died. The same photo that had been missing from Mom's room after the funeral. Olivia turned pale. I could see her lips move. "She knows," she whispered. Mark looked up. "What?" "She knows what we did." He scoffed, but his hands were shaking. I didn't know exactly what they meant by what we did. But I knew enough. The way Olivia avoided eye contact when I mentioned Mom's last hospital bills, the sudden cash she flashed at the funeral, the look Mark gave her when I talked about the missing jewelry from Mom's estate box. There were secrets buried deeper than grief. The next day, I went into town and visited the lawyer who'd handle Mom's will. A quiet man named Harper, gray suit, thick glasses, the kind of guy who noticed details but never gossiped. He frowned as he went through the files. "You said you wanted to confirm the final distribution?"
Yes.
"And I need to know if there were any changes, any last-minute revisions before she passed." He adjusted his glasses. "Actually, there were. Your mother added a codicil 2 days before her death. It mentioned both you and your sister." My heart dropped. "What did it say?" He turned the monitor around. It read, "In the event of my passing, I want my daughters to share my blessings, but only if they share my values. If one betrays the other, The inheritance will revert to their rightful child. I stared at those words until they blurred. Mom knew. Even dying, she knew Olivia's heart better than anyone. Can that clause be enforced? I asked quietly. Harper nodded. If you can prove a betrayal, yes. I walked out of his office with my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't need to yell, or fight, or destroy. I just needed proof. And I already had the cameras. Back home, Olivia tried to act normal. She made dinner, called me sweetheart, even offered to help me with work emails. But the tremor in her hands gave her away. I spent the evening downloading footage, every suspicious movement, every whispered argument between her and Mark. The pieces were falling together like a cruel puzzle. That night, I stood outside under the stars, the house glowing faintly behind me, and whispered into the air, Mom, I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this for you. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Because revenge had already found a home inside me. Grief makes time lose its edges. Some mornings I woke up and thought it was the day after Mom's funeral again. Rain on the window, the smell of lilies still in the air, that hollow ache behind my ribs. Other mornings, I felt nothing at all, like my body was moving through scenes someone else had written for me. Olivia and Mark had stopped talking to me except for what politeness required. The house had split itself in two, their laughter downstairs, my quiet upstairs. But beneath that silence, something was shifting. The first Real crack appeared when I found the envelope. I was cleaning out the old wooden desk Mom used to use for paying bills when I spotted it, wedged behind a drawer, a torn manila envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. Inside were 2 receipts from a pawn shop in town, dated a week before her death. The items listed? Her sapphire necklace and wedding ring. She never would have pawned those. Not in a million years. My stomach dropped. I could picture it now. Olivia visiting Mom in hospice, telling her I was handling everything, convincing her to sign documents she didn't understand. It made sense of the missing jewelry, of the sudden cash at the funeral, of the guilt that flashed across her face when I mentioned it. That night, I watched the footage again. Mark counting money at the kitchen table. Olivia whispering, "We can't keep it here." Proof enough to start tightening the net. My next step was simple. Information. I drove into town pretending to run errands and stopped at the pawn shop listed on the receipt. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in. A balding man looked up from behind the counter. "Help you, miss?" I handed him the paper. "These were sold here last year. Do you still have the records?" He squinted at the handwriting. "Yeah, I remember this. A woman came in twice. Said her mother was in hospice. Needed the money for bills." My throat tightened. "Do you remember what she looked like?" He thought for a moment. Blonde hair, maybe late 30s. Had a gold cross necklace. Pretty but nervous. Kept saying she'd buy them back soon. That was all I needed. I thanked him, stepped outside, and sat in my car for a long time, the world spinning. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft, deception, desecration of everything Mom valued. I felt something settle inside me then. Not rage, exactly, something quieter, heavier, more certain. That evening, I made dinner for all of us for the first time since the funeral. Mark looked surprised. Olivia looked wary. "Figured we should have a proper family meal," I said, setting plates on the table. We ate in silence for a while until I looked straight at her. "Do you ever miss Mom's jewelry box? The one with the velvet lining?" Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" she said too quickly. "I just keep thinking about those pieces she loved. Especially the necklace Dad gave her." She forced a laugh. "Oh, I'm sure it'll turn up. You know how things get lost when someone passes." Mark shifted in his seat.
He couldn't look at me.
I leaned back, smiling. "Funny. The pawn shop owner in town says otherwise." The air went heavy. For a moment, I could hear nothing but the ticking of the old wall clock. Olivia's eyes darted to Mark, then back to me. "You're digging where you shouldn't, Emily," she said quietly.
"Maybe," I said.
"Or maybe Mom already did the digging for me." I stood, collected my plate, and left them sitting there in silence. The next morning, the house was different. Mark was gone before sunrise, claiming a job leading town. Olivia avoided me completely. I didn't mind. I had more work to do. I spent the day compiling the evidence, the pawn receipts, the video clips, the clause from the will, everything. It felt clinical, almost cold, but under the surface was a tremor of satisfaction. I wasn't just reclaiming what they'd taken. I was reclaiming myself. That night, I sat on the porch again, phone in hand, scrolling through the last voice message Mom had ever sent me. Take care of each other, baby. Houses can be rebuilt. Hearts take longer. Her voice cracked on that last line. I whispered back, I'm trying, Mom, but maybe rebuilding means tearing down what's rotten first. 2 days later, the storm came. A literal one. Thunder rolling through the forest, rain slamming against the windows. The kind that makes power flicker and shadows twist in every corner. I was in my room when I heard it, Olivia shouting downstairs. Then the sharp crash of something breaking. When I stepped into the hallway, she was standing by the fireplace, papers scattered around her. My papers. You've been spying on us, she screamed, waving a handful of printed photos from the camera feeds. I didn't move. You broke into my room. You had no right. No right. I cut her off, my voice low, steady. You pawned Mom's things. You lied about the will. You moved into my house without asking. Tell me, Olivia, which of us really crossed the line first? For a second, she looked small, like the girl who used to braid my hair before school. Then her eyes hardened. You always thought you were better than me. Mom's favorite. The good daughter. I was the one who stayed, I said. That's all. She threw the papers down and stormed upstairs. I let her go. I didn't need another argument. The truth had already done its work. Later that night, I found Mark sitting in the truck, rain streaking down the windshield. He looked tired, cornered. She's losing it, he muttered when he saw me. You should talk to her before she does something stupid. I studied him.
Funny.
That's exactly what I was about to say to you. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I know about the pawn shop, Mark. I know about the money. And I know you pushed her into it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he didn't have a slick comeback. Whatever she told you, he finally said, you don't know the full story. Then tell me. He hesitated. Your mom promised to leave the house to Olivia. She told her that when she got sick. But she changed it later, after you came back. Olivia thought she was taking what was hers. That doesn't make it right. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. When the storm finally broke, the house was silent again. Olivia locked herself in her room. Mark drove off before dawn, and I was left with the sound of dripping rain and the smell of wet pine. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and looked out into the woods. The camera feeds on my tablet blinked softly beside me, showing every corner of the house, every lie unraveling in real time. I thought about sending the footage to the lawyer that morning, ending it cleanly, legally. But then I thought of Mom's voice again. Houses can be rebuilt. Hearts take longer. Maybe revenge wasn't about punishment. Maybe it was about exposure, light flooding into the darkest parts of what we hide. I didn't need to destroy Olivia. I just needed her to face herself. So I printed one of the still images from the camera, her hand holding the pawn slip, her face clear as day, and slid it under her door. No words. Just the truth staring back at her. The next day, she was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just an empty closet and the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the hallway. For the first time in months, the house was quiet again. Not heavy quiet, but peaceful. I made coffee, sat in Mom's rocking chair, and let the morning light spill through the windows. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. The world outside was still wet, but the air smelled like something ending. Or maybe beginning. The first morning without Olivia felt strange. Not peaceful, not painful, just empty, the kind of emptiness that hums in your ears when everything else goes quiet. The air in the house felt different too, lighter. I walked barefoot through the kitchen, sunlight pooling on the floorboards, and for the first time since Mom's funeral, I could actually smell the coffee I brewed. It didn't taste like bitterness anymore. Outside, the woods glistened with dew. Birds returned to the feeder. Even the wind through the trees sounded softer, like the house itself had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. But peace can feel suspicious when you've lived in chaos too long. For the first few days, I threw myself into restoring order. I cleaned every room, boxed up what Olivia left behind, scrubbed away her perfume from the upstairs bathroom. It wasn't about spite, it was about reclaiming space. Each stroke of the mop, each drawer I organized, felt like stitching up something that had been torn. I found myself talking to Mom out loud sometimes. "See, Mom? I'm fixing it. I'm keeping the house the way you want it." I knew she couldn't answer, but it helped. Her absence didn't echo quite as loudly when I pretended she could hear me. I spent afternoons repainting the porch, sanding old furniture, and tending to the wildflowers Mom had planted. Life came back little by little. At night, though, it was different. Silence turned sharp again. The house creaked in ways it never had before, and every gust of wind against the window made me look up from my book. I kept telling myself it was just the quiet playing tricks, but sometimes I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway. Once, I even swore I saw a shadow move past the front door camera, but when I checked the feed, there was nothing there. Just the woods. Still and watchful. One evening, I got an email from Mom's lawyer, Mr. Conrad. He thanked me for providing documentation of the thefts and said the matter had been quietly settled. The pawned jewelry had been recovered. Olivia's share of Mom's savings, what little there was, had been revoked due to breach of trust. It was justice, clean and legal. But when I read it, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt sad. Olivia was still my sister. She'd just become someone I didn't recognize anymore. A week later, a letter came in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable, Olivia's. I stood at the kitchen counter, fingers trembling as I opened it. "Emily, I know you think you won, and maybe you did. But you'll never understand why I did what I did. Mom promised me that house. She said it would be mine someday. I just wanted something of her left, something that felt like security. You took that too. Don't worry, I'm gone for good. But remember, you're not the only one who can start over." There was no signature, just that last line underlined twice. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into Mom's old recipe box, right between lemon pie and buttermilk pancakes. Some things were better stored away quietly. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not even Mr. Conrad. Instead, I focused on the small, tangible things that kept me grounded, fixing the front steps, repainting the shutters, learning to cook again. The days started to form a rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Afternoons spent drawing new designs. I'd begun freelancing as an architect again, finally taking clients who didn't drain my soul. Evenings spent reading by the fireplace. It was the kind of simple life I'd dreamed about before everything fell apart. But sometimes, when I looked out at the tree line, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise, like someone was watching. One night in early spring, I woke up to the sound of tires crunching gravel. I sat up, heart hammering. The clock read 1:23 a.m. For a second, I thought it was nothing, a delivery truck turning around, or maybe a lost hiker. But then headlights cut across the living room through the window slats. I grabbed the tablet connected to the cameras. The feed flickered, then steadied. A car was parked at the end of the driveway. Black sedan. No plates visible. I zoomed in, waiting for someone to get out. But after a minute, the engine revved, and the car backed up slowly, disappearing down the road. I sat there long after it was gone. Every light in the house turned on. Every door locked twice.
I didn't sleep that night.
The next morning, I walked the property, trying to shake off the unease. The forest was quiet except for the occasional bird call. Still, I noticed something I hadn't before, fresh tire marks in the dirt near the mailbox. Someone had been here. That afternoon, I went into town to the sheriff's office, just to report it. Deputy Hall took my statement, nodding politely. "Could be hunters, ma'am. Or a delivery that took a wrong turn," he said. "But we'll send someone to check it out." He handed me a card. "If you see the car again, call this number directly." I nodded, thanked him, and drove home. But I didn't tell him what I really feared, that it wasn't some stranger. It was Olivia. That night, I sat in Mom's rocking chair, looking out into the trees. The wind was restless again, the branches whispering against each other. I thought about everything we'd lost, not just the house or the money, but the connection that once made us a family. How fragile trust could be, how betrayal leaves echoes that don't fade even when the betrayer is gone. Still, I couldn't hate her completely, because somewhere in that mess of jealousy and grief, there was pain. We'd both lost Mom, just in different ways. Maybe Olivia was still out there trying to rebuild, same as I was. Maybe she was just lost. I whispered into the quiet, "I hope you find peace too, Liv." Weeks passed. Spring turned to early summer, and the woods filled with life again. Fireflies, birds, the scent of rain-soaked earth. I started hosting small gatherings for neighbors, something Mom would have loved. We'd sit on the porch drinking iced tea, talking about gardening or work, and for a while I could almost forget the chaos that came before. Sometimes, though, I'd catch my reflection in the window at dusk and see how much I'd changed. My hair longer, face calmer, eyes sharper. I wasn't the same woman who let her sister move in after the funeral. That Emily had been naive, desperate for connection. This one was steady, quietly strong. Then, one late afternoon, I found something strange by the mailbox, a small white envelope with no name, sealed with tape. Inside was a photo. It was the house, my house, taken from the edge of the woods. The porch light glowing. Me, standing there with a watering can frozen mid-motion. The back of the photo had 2 words written in blue ink. Nice place. My heart stuttered. I looked up at the tree-line. The same trees that had felt protective a week ago now felt too close, too alive. I didn't call the police this time. I didn't even run inside. I just stood there, holding that photo, and for some reason I smiled. Because if it was Olivia, it meant she wasn't as far gone as I thought. She was watching, yes, but watching meant she still cared. And maybe, in her own twisted way, that was her goodbye. That night, I lit a candle for Mom by the kitchen window. The same candle I'd lit at her funeral. The flame flickered gently, reflected in the glass. Outside, darkness pressed against the windows, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. I whispered, "It's done, Mom. We're both finding our way back." And for the first time, I believed it. The woods were quieter that morning than I'd ever heard them. Even the birds seemed hesitant, like they sensed the storm beneath my calm exterior. The frost had melted into the earth, and fog hung low between the trees, curling around the edges of the house that once felt haunted by my mother's memory, and later, by betrayal. Now it was mine again. 2 months had passed since Olivia and Mark left. They hadn't returned, not even once. The last trace of them was a letter Olivia had sent, one short, bitter note with no apology, only blame. She accused me of destroying what little family we had left. I remember reading it over coffee, the morning light cutting through the kitchen window like a blade across the page. "Funny," I whispered to myself. "You can't destroy what was already broken." But even after everything, after reclaiming the house, after finding a fragile kind of peace, something still lingered inside me. A hollow echo, the silence of unfinished grief. I thought that once I removed them from my life, the pain would fade, that the ghosts would leave with them. But grief doesn't work that way. It roots itself deep, tangling around your ribs until you learn to breathe through it. Some nights, I still heard Mom's voice, soft as wind through pine needles. Sometimes it was a memory, sometimes I wasn't sure. "Don't let them change you, Emmy," she'd say. "The world needs the kind of heart that still believes." And I wanted to. I truly did. But belief felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. Winter turned to spring, and the forest transformed with it. Wildflowers broke through the soil, and a new kind of life filled the air. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Mom's illness. At first, my hands trembled, but the more I painted, the more I remembered who I was before the chaos. The canvases filled with color, deep greens, soft blues, streaks of burnt orange. I painted the forest, the house, the light through the windows at dusk. Each brushstroke was like stitching a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found one of Mom's old sketchbooks. She'd been an artist too, back in her youth, though she rarely talked about it. The pages were filled with drawings of the same woods that surrounded the house. But in her sketches, they looked alive, almost sacred. On the last page, she'd written something in her looping handwriting. "This place will heal what the world breaks." I stared at the words for a long time, tears slipping silently down my face. Maybe that's what this house was meant for, not to trap us in memories, but to mend us when everything else had fallen apart. I decided to open it, not as a home anymore, but as a retreat, a space for people like me, people who'd been betrayed, broken, or lost. I called it the Haven. I turned the guest room into an art studio, the old study into a meditation space. I cleared the front porch and filled it with plants. The first few guests came quietly, each carrying their own story. A widow from Oregon, a young teacher who'd lost her best friend, a man who'd walked away from a toxic family. They didn't know my full story, and I didn't ask for theirs. But somehow, in that unspoken understanding, we found connection. Healing wasn't loud, it was slow, patient, often invisible. Then one day, I received a call that made my stomach twist. "Is this Emily Harris?" the voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Officer Larkin, from the Ridgewood County Sheriff's Department. I believe you're the emergency contact for Olivia Bennett." The room spun slightly. I sat down. "What happened?" He hesitated. She's fine now. But there was an accident." My heart thudded painfully. He explained that Olivia and Mark had been in a car crash on a highway near Asheville. Mark was injured badly, but stable. Olivia had a mild concussion. They'd listed me as the next of kin. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My throat tightened, 100 conflicting emotions clawing their way up. Anger, pity, sorrow, disbelief. After everything she'd done, after moving into my house, betraying me, turning Mom's death into a weapon, she still put my name down. Because somewhere deep down, I was still her sister. I drove to the hospital in silence. When I entered her room, she looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, bruised, her hair messy, her eyes glassy with painkillers and confusion. She blinked when she saw me. You came?" Her voice cracked, and for the first time in years, she looked like the girl who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms. The girl I'd protected. "I did," I said softly. She tried to smile, but tears rolled down instead. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again." "I didn't," I admitted. But then I remembered. Mom wouldn't want me to become someone who could walk away from family when they're hurt. Her lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Emily. For everything. I didn't know how to handle losing her. I blamed you because it was easier than facing what I did wrong. I wanted to hate her still. I really did. But sitting there, watching her tremble under hospital sheets, I couldn't. Because forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in, it's about letting yourself out." "I know," I said quietly. "And maybe someday, we'll both figure out how to make peace with it." The next few weeks blurred together. Olivia recovered slowly. Mark too, though our paths never crossed. He didn't try to reach out, and I didn't offer. Whatever existed between him and my sister had already burned to ash. When Olivia was finally discharged, she asked if she could visit the house. "I want to see what you've done with it," she said shyly. "I heard about your retreat. Mom would have loved that."
Part of me wanted to say no.
But another part, the one that still remembered our mother's laugh, the Christmas mornings, the late-night talks, knew this was the real test. When she arrived, her eyes widened. "It's beautiful, Em." We walked through the house together. The air between us was fragile but honest. She ran her fingers along the painted door frames, touched the old sketchbook I'd framed in the hall. When we reached the back porch, she stopped. "Do you ever miss her?" "Every day," I said. She nodded, looking out toward the forest. I thought if I could just hold on to everything she left behind, Mark, the house, the things she loved, I'd feel close to her again. But I see now she's not in any of that. She's in us, I said softly. Or, at least, what's left of us. For the first time in years, she smiled. Not out of guilt or defense, but genuine warmth. We sat there for a long time, watching the sun sink behind the trees, letting silence do what words never could. Later that night, after she left, I stood on the porch and looked up at the stars. The air smelled like pine and rain. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, yes, but also gratitude. For survival. For clarity. For the painful lessons that had carved me into someone stronger. Mom was right. This place did heal what the world broke. But it wasn't the house that did it. It was the choice to stay, to face the pain instead of running from it. I realized something else that night. Revenge might bring satisfaction, but forgiveness brings freedom. And that freedom? It was the greatest revenge of all. The first snowfall of the new winter arrived quietly, blanketing the woods in a soft silver hush. I woke early that morning, brewed my coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the flakes drift down, catching the faint orange of sunrise. The house, my house, looked peaceful now. No more angry footsteps, no slammed doors, no tension hanging in the air like storm clouds. Just warmth, silence, and the steady rhythm of a life finally rebuilt. It had been almost a year since Olivia's accident, and though we weren't exactly sisters again, we were no longer strangers either. She called sometimes. Sometimes she even visited. Our conversations were short, but honest. There was no pretending things had never happened. We both knew better than that. Healing doesn't erase scars. It teaches you to live with them. And in the quiet of those long winter mornings, I'd started to make peace with mine. I remember one day, about 3 months after she first came back, Olivia had asked me, "Do you ever think we could start over?" I thought about that for a while before answering. "Not start over," I said, "but maybe start from here." She smiled faintly at that, and I realized that was the best either of us could do. We couldn't rewrite the past, but we could write what came next. The retreat, the haven, had grown far beyond anything I'd imagined. Word spread, mostly through quiet referrals and online whispers. People came from across the country, burned-out professionals, grieving parents, survivors of toxic families. They came because they'd lost their way just like I had. Sometimes they stayed for a week, sometimes longer. We'd sit around the fire pit at night, each of us telling stories under the stars. No one interrupted. No one judged. There was one guest I'll never forget, a middle-aged man named Henry. He'd lost his daughter in an accident and hadn't spoken about it in 3 years. On his last night here, he said something that stuck with me. "You can't heal by erasing what happened," he said. "You heal by giving what happened a place to rest." That's exactly what the Haven had become, a resting place for broken things. And somewhere in the process of helping others, I'd unknowingly given my own pain a place to rest too. One evening, I sat by the fire with Olivia. The retreat was empty for the week, just us and the sound of snow against the window. She poured 2 mugs of hot cocoa, something we hadn't done together since we were kids. She looked at me with a kind of quiet sincerity that made my chest tighten. "I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately," she said softly. "Me too," I said. "Every day." "I used to think she loved you more," Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. "That's why I was so angry. I thought if I could just take what you had, Mark, the house, even her approval, I'd finally feel enough." My heart ached at her words. Not because of the past, but because of how painfully honest they were. "You were always enough," I said. She just saw us differently. You were her fire. I was her calm. She needed both. Olivia nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. I wish I'd understood that sooner. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You do now. That's what matters." For the first time in years, I saw my sister, not the rival, not the betrayer, but the girl I grew up with. The one who used to dance barefoot on the porch while I played guitar. The one who used to whisper, "Promise we'll always be best friends." I realized I'd missed her. Not the version that hurt me, but the one that existed before everything went wrong. And maybe, just maybe, she'd been missing me too. The following week, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from Olivia. A painting exhibit, her first. Apparently, after seeing my studio, she'd started painting again too. The invitation said, "For Emily," who reminded me that creation is the opposite of destruction. When I stood in that small gallery, surrounded by her work, I felt something inside me quietly shift. Her paintings were full of light, scenes of forests, rivers, open skies. In one, I recognized the house. My house. The house that had once divided us now glowed on canvas, peaceful and strong. When she saw me staring at it, she walked over and whispered, "It's called home." I smiled. "You finally understand what that word means." "Yeah," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Thanks to you." We hugged. It wasn't perfect and it didn't fix everything, but it was real. And real is more powerful than perfect ever could be. That night, back in the woods, I lit a candle on the porch and looked up at the stars. "I hope you're watching, Mom," I whispered. We finally got it right. The wind picked up through the trees then, soft and warm despite the cold. I could almost hear her laugh in it, the kind that used to echo through the kitchen when Olivia and I made a mess baking cookies. She'd be proud, I thought. Not because I forgave, but because I grew. Because I turned pain into purpose. Because I built something from what tried to break me. The next morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. The one I'd started the week after Mom's funeral. The first entry was angry. Scrawled words filled with bitterness and confusion. The latest one, written just now, was simple. "I understand now. The woods weren't meant to isolate me. They were meant to teach me how to be alone without being lonely." I closed the book and smiled. The past would always be part of me. Mom's death, Olivia's betrayal, Mark's deceit, but they no longer defined me. They were just chapters in a much larger story. One about loss, yes, but also about resilience, redemption, and the quiet beauty of beginning again. Sometimes I get letters from former guests. They tell me how they've changed, how they've started living again. One woman wrote, "The haven didn't heal me. It reminded me I was never beyond healing." That line stayed with me, because that's what this whole journey was about. Not revenge, not justice, but the rediscovery of self. When people ask what happened after my mom's funeral, I usually just say, life happened. But what I really mean is grief, betrayal, love, forgiveness, growth. All of it. Because life doesn't give you one without the others. And the real strength? It's not in what you do to those who hurt you. It's in choosing to build something beautiful despite them. So, if you're listening to this and you've been broken, if someone betrayed you or took from you, or left you with nothing but an echo of what once was, please know this. You can still rebuild. You can still heal. You can still stand in the ashes of what you lost and say, "This is not the end of me." Because healing isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 quiet choices to keep breathing, to keep walking, to keep believing that maybe, just maybe, peace is still possible. And one day, you'll wake up, look around, and realize you're no longer surviving. You're living, just like I am, in a house in the woods, where everything once broke, and everything finally began again.